Welcome to The Human Side of Money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Each episode is designed to help you enhance client outcomes and forever change the trajectory of your advisory business. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Daniel Crosby, welcome back to the show.
Brendan, good to be with you, man.
Thank you for writing another book, by the way, because it gave me an excuse to be like, all right, now we can have him back, because I just had to fight the urge ever since you first joined. So if I said, guess how long ago, how many years ago was it that you first joined the podcast? What would you say?
4
years ago, October of 2020, episode 8. You're an OG of the show. And maybe I was thinking about it earlier, possibly the sole reason that it still exists today. It may have been the bump and the catalyst that it needed to get going. But it was kind of crazy to sit there and think, man, this was 4 years ago. And according to the End of History illusion, we're probably not even the same people as we were the last time we talked.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the same person. I'm so much better than I was 4 years ago.
Well, you have lost weight, so props to you on that. The biggest difference.
There's less of me than 4 years ago, for sure.
Now, the biggest change that I see, though, is, and I think we mentioned this even in the last episode, but there's no guitars behind you anymore. That was a staple.
They're off to they're right here. They're stage left. You can't see them, but I'll tell you what, though, a little inside baseball. I'm going to set up a standing desk here so I can record some of my stuff from a second desk where you can see the guitars, because people are consistently sad about it. So they're still here. Have me back in another 4 years and you'll see them.
There's some concern over the guitars. Understandable. All right. So are you still a Cardinals fan? That was also established last time around. Usually if somebody's a Cardinals fan, it's a shortcut to say that they're a good person. Can you confirm or deny that?
No, I can confirm that I have always been and will always be a Cardinals fan, despite their recent swoon.
Yeah, we won't go there because that'll take us off the rails. Now, there's one question that I've been waiting for a couple of years to ask you, and the moment is finally here. And it was already on my mind, but then a couple days ago on Twitter, I put out there and said, hey, Daniel Crosby's coming on in the next few days. If you could ask him anything that he hasn't answered, what would you ask him? Probably not surprisingly to you, a lot of these questions revolved around Diet Coke. And so I decided, I had this question that I wanted to ask you anyways, as he holds up but is that a Diet Coke can? That doesn't look like that.
It's a Coke Zero, same difference.
Oh no, is that okay?
It's funny. Some people go, why don't you, I saw on your Twitter, they say, well, why Diet Coke and not Coke Zero? I'm an indiscriminate calorie-free soda drinker. As long as it's Coca-Cola and it's 0 calorie, it's going down. So I like them both. I love them both equally.
Let's say that they were both they're being suspended. They're no longer selling either one of them anymore. And you had one last chance at a clearance sale to stock up on one or the other. Which one are you going with?
Coke Zero.
Okay. All right. Okay. So here's the question. I come to you and I say, Daniel, I've got bad news. For the rest of your life, you can only have Diet Coke or Chick-fil-A, but you can't have both. What do you do?
Oh, that's exceedingly easy. Diet Coke. I mean, there's lots of other good fried chicken places. Like we got Zaxby's, we got what's the other one with the comeback sauce? I can't think of it now. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of other good fried chicken places. There's only one Diet Coke, and Diet Pepsi is a poor substitute. So
not even close. Yeah,
not even close. Send it back.
Comeback sauce. What is it? There are people literally yelling at their phone, or as they're listening right now.
Canes or whatever it's called.
Yeah. That's right. Okay. All right. So we've got that out of the way. We've got the Diet Coke question, or Coke Zero, Diet Coke. You're taking that over Chick-fil-A because you're also a self-proclaimed Chick-fil-A lover, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, I'm having it for lunch ever since now, as of 30 seconds ago, it's going down. 12-piece nuggets, kale salad. It's the move. 510 calories loaded with protein. That's for lunch.
And they know you by name when you show up.
That's right.
All right. So, like I said, you wrote a book. It gave us an excuse to have you back on. In an ideal world, the two of us could probably sit here and we could discuss everything in the book in depth and record maybe the longest podcast of all time.
We could Rogan it. We could Rogan it.
We could definitely Rogan it. There's 50 chapters, right? So 50 chapters, 50 topics. We're probably not going to cover all of them, but I did at least want to ask you this. How did that format go about? Because that's a little bit different from your past books, The Laws of Wealth and The Behavioral Investor. So how did that come about?
Yeah, it's very different. And there's actually a story there. So I knew that I wanted to write a book on money and meaning. I knew that this was sort of the book I needed to write. I knew this was next. But I initially started writing it in a fairly traditional format. You know, my previous books have been, call it 250 pages a piece, 10 to 12 chapters of 20 to 25 pages a piece. Pretty standard. I started The Soul of Wealth in that same vein. Like I started it and I wrote about 80 pages of it. And Brendan, it sucked. It just wasn't good. I don't know what to tell you. It just was kind of uninspired. I felt like I was sort of stretching and putting a lot of fluff and filler in there. And I looked back on it and I was like, look, this isn't good. And so I set the project aside. And during this time, I got gifted the Rick Rubin book, The Creative Act. Now, Rick Rubin is the producer that's worked with the Beastie Boys and Johnny Cash and all these Jay-Z, all these luminaries. And his book was like 74 chapters or something of about 2 to 4 pages a piece. And I loved the format. As a tired father of 3, I always try and read at the end of the day, but I have a big job, I have a big family, and I'm tired. It's hard to sit down and read 25, 50 pages. But the Rick Rubin book, I found myself reading a lot more because it was sort of, it felt like progress. And so that book was the inspiration for me very directly. That book was the inspiration for me to write The Soul of Wealth in the format that it ended up being. And people are loving it. Like the format has been probably the best decision of the whole thing. People really, really seem to be enjoying it.
There's actually, as I hear you say that, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's actually like a behavioral science element to the format, right? Like you've got shorter chapters. So you feel like you're like, okay, I can actually sit down and do 2 to 4 pages, but then you do one and you're like, it feels good to get one out of the way. You're like, I could do another one. And so next thing you know, you're not doing 2 to 4 pages, but maybe you're reading 12 pages, right? Because it doesn't feel like as much of a lift. You're making progress as you go along.
Well, yeah, it's unit bias, right? How many times have you sat down? That's what I found with the Rick Rubin book. It's like, well, if I was reading a typical book, there's no way I would have read 25 pages. It felt overwhelming. Right. But I would sit down and read 10 chapters of the Rick Rubin book, which was 30 or 35 pages. Same thing with Netflix. You sit down at night and you're like, oh, hey, your family, like, oh, let's watch a movie. I'm like, I'm too tired. We can't watch a movie. Like, let's just watch a show. Mm-hmm. And then you watch 3 hours, 30 minutes at a time. So we're slowly tricking people into reading my book with unit bias for sure.
I've never felt more known than somebody saying, yeah, we sit down and watch a show and end up watching more of a show than you would from a movie. That hits home. I would imagine too, even from a writing standpoint, right? That like you sit down to write, it's like, okay, I could write on one topic. I could write 2 to 4 pages. Maybe not in one sitting, right? But I bet it probably felt more approachable or digestible or doable to be just knock one out at a time.
It absolutely did. It absolutely did. And it forces parsimony. It forces you to be succinct. And that was one thing, like I felt like I was stretching my chapters before and just like adding filler and big words and fluff. And on this, it's like, okay, bud, you got 4 pages, make it good. Let's go, get to the point. And every chapter has sort of a historical anecdote. It has some research and it has some application. And so you're like, you better get on it because you got 5 pages to put those 3 elements in. And it actually, I think, forced me to be more succinct.
So last question about the making and creating of the book, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper, but did 50 feel like the right number? Did you set out and say it's going to be 50? Like at that point when you got 50, you were like, I could probably go 60. Did it feel like you were stretching to get to 50?
So 50, there's two is a good question. There's really two reasons. 50 felt about right. You know, the very first thing I do, I end up talking to a lot of people about how to write a book, because I think a lot of folks generally and a lot of advisors in particular want to write books. And so 50 felt about right. That was about the number of topics that I wanted to cover. But I also, I say in the introduction, and people have taken me up on this more than I imagined they would. But I wanted people to treat it, or at least have the option to treat it almost like a devotional, almost like sort of a weekly devotional, where, you know, if you take a 2-week vacation, there's 50 weeks in a year, and you read 1 chapter per week. And during that week, you kind of move through the week thinking about, meditating on, implementing the learnings from that chapter. So I threw that in candidly, kind of as an aside. And I've been sort of amazed at how many people have engaged with it at that level. And it's nice. I think it's a rich level at which to engage with the work. So that's been gratifying.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's dive into it. So as you think about it, you look at there's 50 chapters. Was there one that was hardest to write, or one where you felt the most convicted as you were writing it?
Yeah, I mean, the one that sort of I'm worst at, I guess, if that's what you're getting at. I dislike uncertainty about as much as anyone you would ever meet. In fact, a quick, if I may, I don't think I've ever told this. We're gonna break ground here. We're gonna break news on your podcast.
Let's do it.
When I was applying to grad school, right? So I knew I wanted to go to BYU. That was where I wanted to go. I didn't want to go anywhere else. But I applied to a couple of other schools, including Auburn, in my home state of Alabama.
Yep.
And BYU got back to me, and they're like, "Hey, we've made a decision, but we're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell everyone for like 10 days or whatever it was." And I'm like, first of all, psychologically speaking, that's a horrible email to send.
Yeah. Just don't even tell me.
Yeah, like, just tell me you're still thinking about it. Like, we know, but we're not going to tell you. And so this was like a Friday. I get this email. I go through the weekend, and like my stomach is in knots. Like, I'm not sleeping. I'm falling apart because I want to know so badly what I'm going to be doing with my life next. And so on Monday, I called the registrar at BYU, and I'm like, "Look, I have an offer from Auburn. Which I did not. I have an offer from Auburn. They need to know right now. You have to tell me whether I got in or not so I can make this decision." And they're like, "You got in." So I lied. I lied to a Christian university to expedite my knowledge of whether I got into said university. BYU, I'm so sorry. I'm very sorry that I lied to a church school to get in. But I have a very hard time with uncertainty. So writing the chapter on uncertainty was just sort of salting the wound a little bit about just how bad I am at this stuff.
And brought back up the memories of you lying to get in. Hopefully nobody from the BYU admissions department is tuning in.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think about it, sounds to me like you probably should have ended up writing a book on negotiation at some point as well. Like, Chris Voss has sort of not cornered the market, but he's got a bit to take on negotiation. It sounds like maybe you could have taken that for him. Did you lie? Maybe, but you got what you wanted.
Yeah, that's a very Machiavellian stance, my friend. I don't know if this is what we need to be teaching people.
All right. So is the chapter that you're referring to then the one that investing like life is uncertain and that's okay?
That is the one. That is the one. So there's a couple of cool learnings from that one. One is if you look at someone who's receiving a bad medical diagnosis, like someone who fears they may have cancer or something, something big, something heavy like that. I was fascinated to learn when researching that chapter that the point of greatest stress, far and away, is not the initial fear. It's not even the delivery of the bad news. The point of greatest fear and the point of greatest uncertainty is when they're waiting for that biopsy. You've had that biopsy, you're waiting to hear the test results, because even bad news is actionable, right? You go, okay, you have cancer. Okay, chemo, radiation, we're going to fight this thing. Now you've got some odds. Now you've got some timelines. Mm-hmm. That's something to work with. It's really, Tom Petty was right. It's really the waiting really is the hardest part there. The other thing that I thought was so interesting and says really bad things about me is that, when you look at mental health, an ability to tolerate uncertainty is sort of the thing when it comes to good mental health, is that an ability to untolerate uncertainty. If you had to pick one thing that is sort of the hallmark of being well-adjusted, it's an ability to tolerate uncertainty. And, I'm found lacking there. So what can I say?
This reminds me of, I think we may have talked about this on your podcast on standard deviations, or maybe at some point in conversation, but I'm pretty sure you're the one that told me about this. The example or the study of the two cities in Britain where they were being bombed, right? Is that, I can't remember exactly. Yeah. Is that strike? Is that like, to me, maybe explain that, because to me, this plays right into that around just not knowing what to expect and how it affects us.
Yeah, that's a great example. So it was during World War II, and it looked at the bombing in London versus the bombing in the exurbs and the suburbs around London. So certainly London got bombed way more, like 10 times more than the suburbs and the exurbs of London. But when the doctors and the shrinks and everyone comes in to help out in the post-war period, they found that things like ulcers and PTSD and complications from stress were more dramatic in the suburbs. And if you think about it, in London, you're like, look, every night we're getting shelled. Like it's happening. Mm-hmm. So draw the windows, take cover, and prepare for the worst, but you know what you're preparing for. Mm. And when it comes to the suburbs, you're like, maybe not. Like, so you don't know kind of how to prepare. This is why, I talk in the chapter, you talk about going back to some basics, like controlling the controllables, right? Helping clients, really pounding the table on controlling the things that are within our control. And also just sort of owning the warts of the investing process, going to them and saying, like, the market's probably going to drop 10% this year and probably 10% every year after that at some point. Like, that's just kind of what it does. And, every 4 or 5 years, it's going to drop 15 or 20%. And every 7 to 10 years, you're going to have a really gnarly bear market. It's just going to happen. You should expect it. You should prepare for it. And I think sometimes we soft pedal it. I got a call yesterday from a friend who's going to be working with an advisor. They had just gotten out of this sort of pitch meeting with the advisor. And they're like, well, I don't want my account value to go down. Fair. And I'm like, well, it's going to. You know what I mean? Yeah. At various points, it's going to. That is how this works. And you kind of have to explain that to them. I think sometimes we soft pedal uncertainty, we soft pedal volatility, and I don't think we do our clients a favor. And then the other thing, Carl Richards talks about this a lot, and I really like his ideas about this, you don't read the end of a book. Like there's a reason why you say no spoilers when you're talking about a movie. Uncertainty has an upside too. Like there can be positive surprises as well. And I think if you look at the post-COVID market, like is surprisingly good. If you look at the market over the last 15 years of elevated valuations, very good. Like, very good. Better than you would expect. And so, I think we need to sort of pound the table on the reality of volatility and inoculate against uncertainty that way. But also be equally emphatic about, hey, like, what if everything goes right? What if everything is stupendous? Because sometimes it is.
As a self-described just a minute ago, hater of uncertainty. And I think most of us are that way. I mean, to varying degrees, just the brain hates uncertainty. Is there anything, and maybe it may be among what you just mentioned, but anything in particular that you found works well for you to embrace and find your way through that uncertainty? And I mean, obviously, when it came to the application process to get into BYU, your response was, I'm going to take action, take control, take this into my own hands, and then eliminate the uncertainty. And I guess that's not always possible when it comes to money and investing. I mean, I think that's why we probably have this bias towards action to eliminate the uncertainty. But if you can't make a phone call and talk to the admissions department to eliminate the uncertainty, anything around money and finances that you found serves you best?
Yeah. I mean, if you can't lie to an administrator to make the uncertainty go away, what do you do? Yeah. I mean, the two things I just talked about are big, right? Just sort of understand what the roadmap looks like, and, control the things that are in your control. I also try and take a long view. I mean, I put money to work every 2 weeks. And, at times like this, I'm sort of a value investor at heart. And at times like these, you go, oh man, like valuations by any measure are pretty stretched. Like, when we look at history, we're like 97th, 98th percentile now. Like, woof, am I putting money to work in a time of bad value? But, I'm taking the long view and I say, look, I'm investing in the arc of human progress over the long run. I am supremely confident in that bet. I'm less confident in 3 months, 6 months from now. But I think taking that optimistic view, that macro view, and kind of stepping back and aligning your gaze with your goals, I think that helps a lot. In addition to the other two things that I talked about.
One of those was, you mentioned it a couple of times, controlling the controllables. What are some examples of the controllables?
Well, you can control the fees you pay, right? So you pay an appropriate fee. You can control whether or not you work with someone, right? I work with an advisor. I mean, it's my dad, it's someone I trust a great deal, but I pay an advisor. I pay my dad. There's a certain indignity in all of that, right? I pay my dad to help me with my money. And I think that's in your control. Diversification's within your control. Your behaviors within your control. Your perspective, your long-termism or your short-termism is in your control. So all of those things are a better predictor of your long-term financial success than any of the short-term stuff. And it's all within your control.
Savings rate is in your control.
Yeah. Savings rate, huge.
All right. So we all hate uncertainty. Totally with you on that. I could imagine that was as you're writing it, you're just flashing back to the days of calling BYU going, yeah, I hate uncertainty.
I should have told that story in the book. I think I was too embarrassed.
It's out there now.
Yeah, it's a safe space here. Yeah, it's a safe space here.
All right, so let's take it a little bit different direction now. I'll let you off the hook a little bit. But please feel free to continue sharing news stories or opening up here. Which of the chapters are you writing? Which one... And there's not a great way to ask this question. And when you hear it, you're going to be like, that's not entirely fair. So take it however you want. But I'm wondering which one resonated with you the most, which one captivated you the most, or which one hit you the hardest to where you went, that's something I believe in and need to do better myself.
Yeah, I'll talk about the most personal. For sure, the one where I need to do better is on uncertainty. The most personal chapter is the one, health as wealth. It's actually a big reason why there's sort of a micro reason and a macro reason why I wrote the book, and this is the micro, the personal reason. In early 2021, I thought I was dying. So I began to have these really painful symptoms, like the worst I have ever had. My head just felt like electrical static. I was really sensitive to light to the point that I would go blind in one eye. Like I was having really searing migraines, and it was very bad. Like the pain was really intense, and it was impacting my work and my relationships. And so, you do what you do, which is you go to WebMD and you look it up, and what comes back is just a complete.
And then you spiral.
Yeah, it's a horror show, right? Like what comes back is just a nightmare. And so sort of the least problematic thing that WebMD suggested was a tooth problem. And so I went to my dentist. My dentist does a host of x-rays and scans and sort of a manual exam. And they're like, your teeth are fine. And I had never had a tooth problem in my life. I've never had a cavity. Like, so, they're like, it's not your teeth. And so then I start going down the list of like the scarier stuff. And, I go to a psychiatrist, and I go to an ear, nose, and throat and a sinus specialist, and, get a CAT scan and an MRI and like just all kinds of brain scans and all this stuff. And nothing. No one can find anything. And so one night the pain just got excruciating, and I had my wife, we had a friend come watch the kids. I had my wife take me to the ER, and on the drive to the ER, I'm in the front seat of my wife's car, and I'm just bawling. I'm just crying, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, why can't we figure this out? What is wrong with me? And I tell my wife, I'm like, I would give every penny that we have to figure this out. I'm like, everything I had worked for, and I'm someone who loves money, writes about money, thinks about money, saves aggressively. Everything we had worked for, it felt so small in that moment, compared to what I was going through. And, to bring the story to a happy ending, 2 weeks later, I was with my boss in Atlanta, and I bite into a sandwich, and one of my molars just splits in half. Like it had been my tooth the whole time, and my dentist had just missed it. And because my dentist missed it, I just never revisited it and thought it was something else. So I'd had this like horrible tooth infection and a cracked tooth the whole time, and my dentist just screwed up. So anyway, so that was it. And I went and they pulled the tooth, and I felt fine the next day. And so it wasn't a brain tumor. It was a dumb, a cracked tooth. But I'll never forget, this thing that is top of mind for me 99% of the time. This thing that is top of mind for me 99% of the time was absolutely the last thing I was worrying about at that moment. And, I give examples in the chapter of how a lot of times we neglect our health in the pursuit of wealth. I had done that historically too. You talked about, I've lost a lot of weight this year. I got in shape because, 15 years of traveling and putting my career first and things like that had led me to really back burner health considerations. And it's a big deal. And I hope that people can learn from my tale of woe and start to realize that health is wealth.
So the message there being, it's sort of like, what is your wealth without health? Or you have to have health in order to enjoy your wealth. So don't sacrifice one in pursuit of the other.
Well, yeah. And it even goes, for sure that. And it even goes deeper than that to talk about, people, I talk in the book, people who exercise, a handful of times a week spend thousands less a year on health premiums, of course, but they also make more money. It's kind of this idea that, how you do anything is how you do everything. It's like if you can get your health right, other parts of your life tend to get elevated as well. People who take care of their mental health, I've found in the book that people who go to therapy make dramatically more than their same education peers. So men who go to therapy make 12% more than their same education peers, and women who go to therapy make about 8% more, probably because men are more screwed up. But this is, this is incredible. Like people who take care of their bodies, people who take care of their minds, not only are there sort of the most immediate benefits of that, like there's also workplace and career and financial benefits to that.
Well, as somebody whose wife is a therapist, I'm going to tell her to add that research to her website. So those who see a therapist make more money. That's good. And as somebody I just scheduled an appointment with a therapist for a couple weeks from now. So I guess I should expect a raise in the new year. So this is good. This is all good information. I appreciate that.
I'm going to talk to RFG for you. 12%, you're due.
The other thing that I heard as you were telling that story about not trying to figure out what was going on is once again, back to the uncertainty thing. Like uncertainty was rearing its head once again. And all in that moment, there was no certainty. You didn't know what was going on. And like you kind of said it, you were like, I would give anything just to know what is this? Because once I know, then I can do something about it and act and move forward. But the uncertainty of not knowing must have just been like crippling.
No, it was awful. And it's wild. I when I was doing clinical work, I had to deliver bad news to people, with some regularity. Yeah. It's like, hey, you've got this, mental illness, or your kid has a learning disability or whatever. And almost to a person, people felt relief. People felt relief. And, if you look at the number one thing that keeps people out of the office of a financial advisor, there's some research that shows it's a fear of judgment. And so people will, not go see an advisor because they go, well, what if they tell me I've been doing it wrong? Or what if they laugh at my, the way I've been doing it? And I think that like, even if it's bad news, like even if you have been doing it wrong, I think the message there is that even if it's bad news, having some news is a powerful starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we talked about uncertainty. Health is wealth. Here's the next one for you. Of the chapters, which one would you want your kids to read as of right now? Like if you were like, kids, you need to open it up. Here's the chapter you need to read. I want to try to instill this message. Which one would it be?
Yeah. So my dad, who is an advisor, every time I talk to him, my parents, my parents have a really interesting tendency, which is good and bad. They really don't care much about professional success. They really just don't care much. They care that you're putting first things first, right? That's kind of what my dad talks about is, my parents are much prouder of my happy family than they are of my book sales or something like that. And, look, there's balance to be had. I get that the family's more important, but sometimes you just, sometimes you want to be happy that you sold some books too. So,
well, what about when you tell them that you were on the Human Side of Money podcast? Do you think that will trump?
That is gonna blow their minds.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Just making sure.
Yeah. No, that they're going to be super proud.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Every time I talk to my dad, it's like, are you putting first things first? So I would have a similar message for my kids. And, one of a lot of the book is about this idea broadly, but in particular, one of the chapters is you don't want to be rich, you want to be free. Right. And the way this chapter came to me was a very specific thing I read. I was reading about Elon Musk, who I am forever linked to for a popularized my Diet Coke tweet. But, I was reading a thing about Elon Musk, and he was talking about a standing 9:00 meeting he has on Saturday nights. And I read this and I read it again, and I'm like, I am literally richer than Elon Musk, because on Saturday night, I am just doing whatever I want. Like I am not meeting with my top lieutenants. I am watching movies I'm watching Lord of the Rings with my son. I'm out, hanging out with the fam. I'm with my friends. I'm eating good food. I'm doing anything but having a meeting to talk about making more money when I already have plenty. And some people, when I've talked about that, people would push back and say, well, hey, he just loves what he does, right? Like he loves what he does so much. And like, you just can't relate. You must not love what you do.
Maybe that's what he would choose to be doing with his time at 9:00. Yeah.
But the book actually refutes that. Like even the research actually talks about, even for people who love what they do, even for people who are materialistic. So, I mean, let's say $200 billion isn't enough for you, and you want to get more, right? Even for people who love their work, even for people who are materialistic, buying time, buying freedom is one of the best things that you can buy. And people just tend not to prioritize it. And so that would be one of the things I would ask my kids, are you keeping first things first? And are you buying yourself the freedom to do the things that really matter? And that is the driving force I save very aggressively. And that is the driving force behind my savings, is just buying freedom. Like that's my number one. That's the number one good I want to do with money.
Well, I was going to ask, because I know, as you said, the format of the structure of these chapters is like, you want to hammer home a point. There's usually some research or an anecdote, and then some practical application. My question was going to be, is there a practical application from that? And I guess that would be one. So my question is there more? But it sounds like one of them would be, the more you save, or to some degree, the diligence and the amount of which you save can buy you freedom. Is there any more like direct practical application on that? Like how not just being rich, but being free, and the idea of time?
Yeah. So I talk about self-determination theory. I talk about some of Daniel Pink's work. I talk about the work around self-determination theory. And both of them sort of center around this idea that if you want to motivate yourself, like if you want to really get the engine of your productivity going, there's really three things to focus on. And it's mastery, autonomy, and purpose, right? So being good at what you're doing, having the freedom to do it on your terms, and having it serve a higher purpose. That's kind of the message I would bring home to my kids. Like, are you a craftsman or a craftswoman, right? Like, are you the best in the world? Are you working to be the best in the world at whatever it is you want to do? And I don't care if you're a photographer, a kindergarten teacher, a psychologist, or whatever. What are you doing to hone your craft? Are you putting yourself in a position to do that on your own terms? Because so many people are living lives of quiet desperation in sort of cubicle email jobs because they're not buying themselves that autonomy. And are you doing it for some higher purpose, right? Those are the three things that speak to motivation.
So one more thing along these lines, and I know it hits on what you said, but it also ties into another chapter in the book on what is it? Time is the ultimate purchase. And you mentioned a second ago the idea and the concept of buying time, which it's not novel, it's not new, but for me, like a couple of years ago, like really hit home. It was sort of transformational and allowed me to actually look outside while I was sitting at the table, look outside and watch somebody mow our lawn and not feel guilty about it, because I started realizing like, okay, so yes, that person is mowing my lawn. I don't have to feel like less of a man because somebody's out there mowing my lawn, because what I'm doing while I'm in here is I'm not just at the table, but I'm hanging out with my kids. Right. And so it's like, I bought back the time that in order to hang out and spend time with my kids. But you made a good point. Like, just generally speaking, I don't think that comes naturally. I don't think people do a great job of that. Do we know why that is? I mean, maybe we're just speculating here, but that's always kind of surprised me, is why that feels like such a hard concept for so many people to grasp and do anything with.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think one thing, so first of all, 2% of people do that. Okay. Experimentally, when they look at it, I cite research in the book that shows like, hey, if you give someone $50 and say, hey, buy yourself something with it, 98% of people are buying knickknacks, right? And 2% of people are buying something that saves them time.
For what it's worth, by the way, I sounded surprised, but I did underline it. I'm double checking my work here, and I did actually underline the 2% in the book. So,
yeah. So I think part of it is just a misapprehension of what makes us happy, right? We think it's going to be things, and it's really going to be time. I think a second thing is, you were kind enough to share something on Twitter yesterday. I'm going to forget the exact line that I wrote in the book, but basically I'm like, time is literally the only thing you can buy that is always more valuable, like the next moment, right? I mean, it is, time is forever appreciating because time is forever running out of all of our individual hourglasses. So the value of all of our time is forever appreciating. What else can you say that about? I mean, literally nothing. And, when you think about the way we get habituated to things, if you buy whatever, a sweater or a car or some shoes or, whatever you want to spend your money on, entropy and wear and tear in life are going to make that thing less valuable and less precious and less good than it was before. Time ages like fine wine, right? Like time just gets better and better and better. And so instead of spending something on something with diminishing returns that you get used to quickly, spend it on the one thing that's always going to get better.
Yeah, I thought that's why I tweeted it out, because I read it and I was like, and I had like I should have used the mind blown emoji, that probably because that's how I felt in the moment. It was like, that's mind blown. But I think I used the fire emoji instead. So still, I think still accurate.
I appreciated the fire emoji. I thought that was fine.
Yeah. Okay, so your kids are how old?
15, 11, and 8.
Let's say it's 20 years down the road. So they'd be 35, 31, 28. Got my math down. Would it be the same chapter? Would there be a different chapter that you'd like point out and highlight to them?
Yeah, I think, the one about, I'm going to forget the name. There's 50 chapters. Go easy.
I've got it. I've got the book right here.
Yeah, like anything worth doing is risky, effectively. I think that's one thing. I don't have a ton of regrets in my life, but I think I wish I had taken bigger risks earlier. And I think it gets harder when you have kids, but I wish I had taken bigger risks earlier. And so I think, anything worth doing is risky. And again, I think a lot of people don't. If you think about the most meaningful thing you've done, right? Like if you ask any person on the street, what's the most meaningful thing you've ever done? Inevitably, it's going to have a couple of things in common. And two of the things that it's going to have in common are going to be that it took some element of risk and that it took some element of effort, right? There will be skin in the game, there will be hard work, and there will not be a guaranteed positive outcome. And I think that a lot of times people live these kind of gray lives, these safe lives, because they're trying not to take a risk. And so I think that's another deeply important message, especially in young adulthood.
So we're not on the street. So you said you can go up and ask somebody on the street, but what's yours? As I read this quote, by the way, where you said the most meaningful thing you've ever done took risk, uncertainty, and hard work to achieve. I wrote down next to it. I was like, okay, I wonder what Daniel Crosby's was. Like, what was something meaningful that you did that took all those things?
For sure having kids. I think you roll the dice whenever you have kids. And in my family's case in particular, we had our daughter, the 15-year-old, easily, like no problems. But then we had a series of miscarriages. We had three miscarriages in a row. Really heavy, like a really heavy time for my little family. And we went to a doctor, we went to a geneticist, and we were like, look, is this gonna keep happening? And is there something wrong with, what's going on here? Why did we 3 miscarriages in a row? And, this geneticist, this doctor was kind of like, well, like you may or may not, like, if you keep trying, like you may or may not have some really complicated pregnancies or some children with some sort of severe handicaps. And we were like, oh boy, like, this is a lot to consider. And so, my wife and I had to very thoughtfully, prayerfully go, is this something we want to keep trying for, sort of given this tendency? And we did, and, thank goodness we have 3 healthy, wonderful kids, but, anything worth doing is risky. Most small businesses fail like fast. I think 95% of businesses fail within the first handful of years. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Lots of kids with, lots of kids are tough kids, or, families are messy, and it's all hard. It's all hard. But I think it's not an excuse to not try.
Yeah, that actually brings back up. I'm trying to remember which chapter it was in, but you mentioned that part about anything we're doing is risky. Like failure is almost inevitable. There something that stuck out. I don't know why, but there's this one part of the book that stuck out to me more than like most of the rest. And it was the fact that they've done research on like what would make a pitch or a product successful. And I'm going to botch it a little bit, right? But ultimately it was like what they found was that the only differentiator between those that worked and those that didn't was they all failed. They failed about the same number of times, but the ones that succeeded were the ones that took the failure and learned from it and persevered and then turned it into a success. It wasn't like these successes you got to just skip over the failure piece, right? And if there's something else, like if I'm botching that or if there's a better way to describe it, let me know. But for some reason that I took a screenshot of it, it hit home for me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. There's data to back up this idea that you almost like, if you want to succeed, you have to pretty much fail to get there.
Yeah, you nailed it. Is venture capital. They were looking at venture capital and the differentiator wasn't whether or not they failed. It's how they responded to failure. Just like you said, like failure was inevitable. Like 100% of the time there were bumps in the road, there were failures. And it was less about whether or not they failed and had everything to do with how they responded to failure was the difference. And
you mentioned the example that always comes to my mind in light of that concept, sort of that belief or idea, is Thomas Edison, who we see as like, oh, he's the man. He's got all these great inventions. But what nobody ever says is how many times he failed to have these great inventions.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember what chapter that was. If I find it, I'll throw it out there. All right. Which of these chapters, hang on, let me pause and ask this. Has your wife read the book?
My wife has read the book. Now,
nice.
She was not the first to read the book. Let me just say, she was not the first in my family to read the book. My son, my then 10-year-old son, was the first to read the book. Shout out to Liam, who beat my wife to it. But nice. She has read the book.
Well, if I had known that, we would have had Liam join us on the show and like get some feedback on him.
Yeah, Liam is a future billionaire. If I keep trying to get 10% of his future earnings, I can't quite seem to get him to sign off on it. But that kid's going places. But yeah, he was the first to read it.
I mean, you brought him into this world. You should have a little leverage there, a little negotiating power.
That feels fair to me.
What kind of feedback did you get from Liam? Did he say anything after he was done reading?
So what the best the best 2 parts of Liam reading the book for me, well, maybe 3. The first was that a 10-year-old, he was 10 when he read it, that the fact that a 10-year-old could hang with it, ooh, I took as a big compliment.
Good point.
Yeah, like this was the most accessible. I mean, this is the first book I've written candidly that you could really give to clients. And it was really, I felt a nice pat on my own back that a 10-year-old could kind of hang with it. And I mean, there's layers to it. I'm sure there's lots he missed, but the fact that he could understand and hang with it was positive.
Yeah.
The best thing to me is when things would come up organically, though. And that's what I hope will happen with people who read the book. Like, we would be at the store and Liam would see something and he would go, oh, that's like this in The Soul of Wealth, or, oh, that reminds me of this thing from history or this study. And whenever you can draw a line from the book to stuff you're encountering in real life, that's kind of an author's dream.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's cool. Next time when you come back for the third time, we'll have Liam join us and tell us some things.
I'm in.
So your wife has read it. Maybe she's mentioned this to you, but if not, which chapter do you imagine as she was reading through it? Did she read and go, haha, see, I'm glad that he finally gets this, or haha, I knew that he knew this, even though he's never said anything about it.
So first of all, my wife is like the nicest person in the world, and she would never say haha to me. But there is one thing that she has encouraged me to do consistently that I have not taken her up on to this day, that I'm sure she would like to see me. And that is the chapter on the power of gratitude. My wife is excellent at this. She keeps a little bullet journal and she writes down sort of one positive thing about, what happened that day, and has done this for years. And this seems like a really simple thing, but the daily gratitude journal, I quote research in the book that said that keeping that daily gratitude journal, literally writing one thing down a day that you're grateful for, boosts happiness by up to 10%. Which is the equivalent boost you see from taking SSRIs like Prozac. And again, I'm not dissing medication for organic depression. That's very appropriate thing. But sure, it's crazy to think how powerful such a simple act could be. There's another piece of research from that chapter that I really liked that found that people who wrote a letter, the researchers asked them, who's someone in your life who's done good for you but has gone unthanked? Someone who made a difference in your life and you didn't thank them. And the act of going back and thanking that person was good for a month of elevated happiness. And I actually did that. When I was writing that chapter. I actually went back and we're getting a lot. Brendan, you're doing a good job today because I'm sharing a lot of personal stories today. So I went back and thanked. In 6th grade, I switched schools. So I transferred from this school where I had a lot of friends and I was well integrated and very happy. And I got moved to this school where I knew nobody. And 6th grade is hard generally, and it's super hard when you're going to a new school. Yeah. And so I remember so vividly, like it was yesterday, being at my first 6th grade dance and just knowing nobody and just rocking up by the punch bowl and trying to fade into the wall and just feeling so small and so awkward. And there was this girl, Holly Puckett, shout out, who came up and in a totally just friendly, she saw that I was out of place. She came up, she was kind to me. We danced, we were friendly. And that was it. it was just this moment in time. It's not like we became best friends then or anything. We were cordial for the rest of, middle school and high school. But it's like she saw me. She knew I looked out of place. She did something kind, nothing in it for her. And I went back and thanked her on LinkedIn. I sent her a LinkedIn DM and I'm like, I promise you have forgotten about the 6th grade dance, but that was like a low point for me and you were kind to me. And I thank you for that. So I think this act of going back and finding the person that we may have overlooked or who may have had a big impact in your life and you may not have let them know, letting them know about that is such a powerful thing.
And according to the research, the month after that, the month that followed was the best month of your life because you get a whole month's worth of a boost. Yeah. Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Holly.
So the other thing you said a minute ago that also really stuck out to me in a way as I was reading it was this idea that the act of journaling can boost happiness by about 10%. Is that what it was? Happiness?
Yeah, happiness.
And I was sitting there reading it, thinking to myself, if somebody came and said, hey, Brendan, if you would do this once a day for 5 minutes and journal, you could earn a guaranteed 10% return on your money, I would be like, I mean, hands down, give me that right now. 10% return, no doubt about it, no brainer. And then I was sitting there feeling convicted, going, doesn't it feel like it would be just as, if not more worth it to do this every day, to have the same type of return for my mental health and my well-being and my happiness? And so I had this conviction yesterday going, if I reframe it and think of it in terms of returns on my money, it's like a no-brainer. Why would it not be when it comes to my happiness? So,
well, I'm glad I made you feel bad. First of all,
it did. Yeah.
No, I write about this in the book. I think this is one of the most interesting things in behavioral science. I call these River Jordan problems after a Bible study. Brendan, we're gonna take him to church. Two southern dudes just taking him to church right
Let's
now.
do it.
But there's a story in the Bible of this rich, powerful guy called Naaman, who has one small problem, which is leprosy. And so he's this rich, powerful military leader in his community, and he has leprosy. And so he sends his servant to this, the local prophet, the local holy man, and says, hey, what should I do? And the prophet goes, go bathe a couple times in the River Jordan. And the servant comes back and goes, okay, well, here's the drill. You go bathe in the River Jordan. And Naaman's like, what? He's like, that's not even the best river like that. The River Jordan sucks. It's dirty. That's not even a nice river. Like, we got better rivers. Like, forget it. I'm not going to do it. And the servant basically says, hey, look, if he had asked you to do something hard, you would have done it. Like, why aren't you, why not give it a shot? And he goes, okay. And he does it and he's healed. And I think that's like it's a perfect analogy for how we are sometimes with these behavioral solutions. Sometimes the answer is just so simple. Mm-hmm. I mean, take 90 seconds a day to count your blessings. Take 90 seconds, take 30 minutes to write a handwritten note to someone who did you a solid, that meant something to you, who you perhaps never properly thanked. It is the easiest thing in the world. And sometimes it's so easy that we overlook it. And I think that's just, it's a big problem.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for making me feel less bad, or at least justifying my laziness and not journaling. All right. Last thing before we get to the rapid fire 3-pack. This one's not a question because I have one of the chapters. Well, actually, I've got a lot of them that I want to talk about personally, but there's one in particular that I wanted to make sure to talk about. Well, there are a few, but you already answered a couple of them. And I'm trying to decide on that. I've got 3 left. I'm going to go in with one. Here's one we're going to go with. Show me your budget and I'll show you your values. Instead of me saying what it means, since I didn't write the book, can you give us a little insight on what that means and what we can take away from that?
Yeah. So one of the most dangerous tendencies when it comes to trying to put together a good life is the ways that we lie to ourselves about who we are, what we value, and what we're up to. And we systematically give ourselves too much credit. we just do. It's called the fundamental attribution error, right? Like when when Brendan makes a mistake, I think that's because he's like a flawed human. When I make a mistake, it's because I hadn't had my Diet Coke yet, but I'm still a great guy. So, we tend to sort of systemically discount and gloss over our weaknesses. And there tends to be massive disparities between our purported stated values and what we're actually doing. And I think your budget, the way you're spending your money, is actually like a very beautiful, very royal road direct path to who you are and what you value, because that is really where the rubber meets the road. And so what I encourage people to do, and it's kind of got a whole system for this in the chapter, but effectively is like, think about your top 3 or 4 values, right? And most people are going to say something like, faith and family and, education, these really lofty things. It's like, okay, well, if you value loving kindness to the human family, like, are you being charitable? If you value your family, like, are you spending money to better yourself and better your family? Or are you spending it on trivial things? If you say you value your health, are you spending money in a way that's consistent with that? Are you buying healthy food? Do you have a gym membership that you actually use? Are you hiring a personal trainer? So I think for people who go through this exercise, you're going to see places where you go, I know I said that's important to me, but I'm not spending my money like it is. There's another chapter on values that I want to talk about real quick too, is just this idea that the way you spend your money helps bring about the world that you want to see. And it goes from very big things to very small things. Some of the greatest social movements of all time, getting rid of apartheid in South Africa, the civil rights movement in our country, have been driven with economic levers. Rosa Parks's bus boycott, the bus boycott organized in the wake of Rosa Parks' famous action, that was an economic lever. It's like, hey, Montgomery, like, you're going to feel this, right? You're going to feel this pain. If you want to be bad guys, you're going to feel this pain in your pocketbook. In South Africa, like, people divesting of the diamond mines and not playing sporting events there and things like that. The way, think about the world you want to see and see if you are spending your money in a way that brings you more of that world. Last thing I'll say there, in a very small way, my kids, we go to the farmer's market most every Saturday. And the kids are like, this stuff is really expensive. My kids have sort of noticed, they're like, yikes, this is, why is the spaghetti sauce $12 at the farmer's market? And you're like, yeah, like, the spaghetti sauce at the farmer's market is a lot more than Prego, right? All right. But I want to live in a world where small farmers and small business owners can build something they love, make something with their hands, and I can spend a nice Saturday morning with my family. That's worth $12 to me. And so I'm willing to pay up to have that kind of world. And that's what I'm trying to teach my kids.
And it's a better investment in your health because it's a better, higher quality spaghetti sauce. Right.
Totally.
The 2 things that come to mind as you're saying that, one is the idea that I can't remember where I heard this before, but it's not, somebody said, show me your budget in your calendar and I'll tell you what you prioritize and the things that you actually care about, which I think is a really good way to look at it and very true and convicting again. But maybe more than that, as you're talking through this and saying, hey, let's go through and figure out, look at your budget, look at your bank account, see where you're spending. That drives me back to the famous quote that until you make the subconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. And I think that's close to getting it right. But it's like, you're going to go out, you're going to spend money on things, you're going to spend your time on things. And oftentimes it's just this, like, we just do it on autopilot, it's automatic. But by going in and evaluating and taking a minute to assess and go, where am I spending it? You're making that conscious so that you can course correct, right? And go, all right, I say this is important to me, but I'm not really committing much of my money or time to that, right? And so this is an idea of, hey, make this subconscious conscious, otherwise it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate.
Yeah, that's that Carl Jung paraphrase is one of my favorite sort of sentiments of his. And dude, it's really I've lost 60 pounds this year, and people always assume that it was some dramatic thing that I did to
they're
lose that much weight.
So Ozempic, Daniel, is that what it was?
Yeah. I have got losing a bunch of weight in the age of Ozempic gets you a lot of funny questions for sure.
Yeah, I imagine.
But the thing that I have done, literally the one thing, because I was already good about exercising, was keeping track, becoming highly conscious of every calorie that went into my body. Was literally just monitoring what I was eating. If you had asked me before, how much do you eat in a day? Like, how many calories do you eat in a day? I would have told you, like, I don't know, 2,000 or something. And I just have bad genes. When I started eating actually 2,000 calories a day, I started losing 3 pounds a week. So we see that people underestimate both their expenditures and their calorie intake by about a third to a half. And that's what I was doing, right? It was subconscious. It was unconscious. It wasn't accounted for. So I think like elucidating this, like bringing it to the light, it's only then that you're able to work with, like, see the facts on the ground and work with something true.
Yeah. Well, props to you on losing weight. That's no small task. All right. We're moving into the end. The rapid fire 3-pack of questions. I went back and listened to the first episode 8, 4 years ago. 2 of the questions were in that episode. I'm going to ask them again to see if your answers have changed. They've got 2 new ones. So the first one is, well, it's a repeat. But if you could sit back and observe a roundtable discussion, any 3 people talking behavior and psychology and the human condition, who would it be?
Okay, so this one will definitely be new. I think maybe one of them will be a repeat. So I'm going to put my man Viktor Frankl on there. That's my number 1 guy. I'm going to put him down.
Yep.
It was between him and Soren Kierkegaard for that spot. I'm on a big C.S. Lewis and Tolkien kick right now. And, it's historically, I think I have ignored fiction to my own detriment. And I think that the best fiction is laden with behavioral truths, and that's what makes it great. So I know that'll be different than my first answer, but I'm going C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, and Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, okay. We could have a whole nother conversation around this whole idea of ignoring fiction, but also but then being like, I think it could be helpful. That's where I'm at in my life. It's like, I should probably read more fiction. I just don't do much of it.
Yeah.
But so Kierkegaard was in your first round table. I forget the first name. Yalom. What's his first name?
Urban Yalom. Yeah.
Urban Yalom.
Yeah.
And our good friend Brian Portnoy. So we could also combine round tables and do one big discussion.
That 6 would be formidable. I love it.
Yeah. I was actually surprised when I went back and listened that Viktor Frankl was not at your first table. A little bit caught me off guard.
I'm surprised myself. He and Kierkegaard are my top 2.
All right, so you get to gift 1 book to everybody that's listening. I got good news. They already have The Soul of Wealth, The Behavioral Investor, and The Laws of Wealth in their hands as they listen. What would it be?
I'm going to go back. I think The Creative Act was such a good book. I got to help Rick, not that he needs the money, but I got to help Rick sell some books because he was such an inspiration. And I think the longer I live, the more obsessed I become with creation, the more I think it's that the reason why we're here to build something, to make something, to put something into the world. So I think that Rick Rubin book, The Creative Act, is a great one.
Second time it's been mentioned on here. And if there's one book that I would have never guessed would be mentioned more than once, that would probably be it. But as you say it, I'm sitting here going, I better read it.
It's really good. Who else said it?
Justin Castelli.
Oh, good. Yeah. Justin. Yeah. It's a great book.
Yeah, he's a big fan. I think it's episode 90. If anybody wants to go, he was talking about how he's incorporating like life planning into financial planning. But yeah, he mentioned that one as well. So, all right, sounds like I need to order that one, put on this bookshelf behind me. All right, here's one that for some reason, I would have thought that you answered this the first time around because it's been a staple for so long, but apparently I added it after that. Who's the best listener in your life? And then what does that person do so well that makes them such a great listener?
It's definitely my wife. So shrinks talk about this idea of unconditional positive regard.
Is that also Carl Jung, by the way?
It's Carl Rogers.
No, Carl Rogers, right? Another Carl. Yeah, that's right. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Carl Rogers. So unconditional positive regard is this non-judgmental listening and knowing that you could tell them the wildest thing on earth and that they would listen with empathy and love and respect, and that it wouldn't, even if it wasn't the right thing that you did, that they would listen with empathy and non-judgment. My wife embodies that. And she embodies that unconditional love and that unconditional positive regard. Makes her great to be married to and a great friend to all her friends.
And of course, you do the same thing back for her.
I'm not as good as she is, but I'm ever striving.
But if you have a Diet Coke in your hand, it's always possible. Or right. Coke Zero, I'm sorry. All right, last one. You get to hang a poster in the office of every advisor around the world with a message. What would it say?
So, we didn't talk about this chapter with a couple of chapters. There's chapters in the book on purpose. And Frankl quotes Nietzsche throughout his book. The quote is, "He or she who has a why to live can bear with almost anyhow." And it's this idea that if you have a purpose, a higher purpose that you're focused on and that you're working toward, no matter what life throws at you, you can get through it. And there's actually, I won't spoil it, go buy the book, but there's actually a lot of support for that in the financial literature as well, that if we imbue our financial planning process with meaning, things get really good.
Yep, that's a great one. I love that. That one always comes back and hits me right here every time. All right, there you have it. Second appearance, wrapped it up. Could have gone longer, but we're gonna close it there. Just in case somebody's not already on the bandwagon, the Daniel Crosby bandwagon, a member of the fan club, where can they go? What should they do if they want to know more and learn more?
I have a podcast called Standard Deviations. I'd love for you to check out. First and foremost, please go support the Soul of Wealth. I would love that. Yep. I'm also on LinkedIn, Daniel Crosby, PhD, and on Twitter at Daniel Crosby.
Awesome. And we'll link to all that. Daniel, it's been great. It's been a long time coming. Appreciate it. Go enjoy your Coke Zero, and we'll do it again in 4 years.
Go Cards, Brendan.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Information here may be provided in part by third-party sources. These sources are generally deemed to be reliable. However, neither our guest nor RFG Advisory guarantee the accuracy of third-party sources. The views expressed here are those of our guest. They do not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, its employees, or its clients. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Securities offered by registered representatives of Private Client Services, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, LLC, RFG Advisory or RFG, a registered investment advisor. Private Client Services and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place. RFG Advisory is an SEC-registered investment advisor. SEC registration does not constitute an endorsement of RFG by the Commission, nor does it indicate that RFG or any associated investment advisory representative has attained a particular level of skill or ability.